Hi, this is Scott Garibay. Happy Monday. It's very nice to talk to you guys again. I wanted to talk to you about Dungeons and Dragons today. I want to talk about Arcane Libraries, Kelsey Dionne, and her brand new OSR tabletop role-playing game, Shadowdark RPG, which I think is the future of D&D competition. Okay? And I want to talk about Michelle Yeoh, the 2023 Oscars, and I want to talk about openly identifying as what you are and the courage it takes to do that and the value of doing that. All right, let's jump into this. Okay, so I'm telling you right now, so what is the tabletop role-playing game industry? Before January 2023, it was a kumbaya garden of indie, OSR, and D&D, right? And everybody's like, play what you want, it doesn't matter. Everybody just having fun. Who cares, right? And then 2023 OGL crisis happened, and everybody was like, a lot of people's mental health is tied to Dungeons and Dragons, and the stability of the tabletop role-playing game market. Literally thousands of livelihoods are tied to D&D in the tabletop role-playing game market, and there are real stakes on the ground. And the kumbaya garden melted away, and we now stand in contested ground. And I think on the other side of this, we're like, hey, there's real stakes here, right? And the tabletop role-playing game industry is highly contested. We are on contested ground, and every Dungeon Master matters, and every Dungeons and Dragons player matters. And the reason why is what's going to matter in the tabletop role-playing game industry, and because even Dungeons and Dragons can't even make $250 million a year, which is literally one product in other industries, right? Like yachts cost $250 million. That's just one product in the entire industry, and the flagship of our entire industry can't even make the cost of one product in another industry. That there isn't enough room for everybody. There is not enough room to everybody, and that's why everybody, just about done lost their minds in 2023 OGL crisis, because they're like, the stakes were real, and it became, and it became very clear that Kumbaya Garden melted away, contested ground is here. Okay, so now we look at the numbers, right, and what we're seeing is it's D&D, it's OSR, and then it's indie. Wait, needle scratch. Is it indies? No. Here's what we realize: they don't matter at all. The indies don't matter at all. Why? Why does the indie section of the tabletop role-playing game industry matter? They don't put up numbers, right? Their numbers are absolutely horrible. So first of all, so there's a few things we realize now. If you step off of fantasy, nobody cares. Your numbers are gone. You could just a fraction, right? So the only thing that makes money in tabletop role-playing games is fantasy. Okay, go even further. The only thing that makes money is American fantasy. And yes, Modifius is out there creating American fantasy in Europe, right? Like, so I get they're just copying it, right? Like, so the OSR is all that's left. The indies don't matter because they make a whole bunch, because they disqualify themselves for two reasons. They make a bunch of games in genres other than fantasy. You can take them off the board. Nobody cares. Their numbers are so small, you could sweep them away in the dustbin. Okay, and then the other thing is, and we've been having this conversation for 3, 4, 5 years, and we're finally here, right? The reality is nobody wants to play anything but 5e. Nobody wants to go off of the Dungeons and Dragons rule system, because it's so hard to drag people to these crusty, slow 4-hour tabletop role-playing games that they're like, I'm not learning another system on top of that, right? And so, you could say, hey, I'm running 5e, or I'm running a 5e similar system, right? And people are like, okay, as long as it's super close, and incredible pains were exerted to make sure that it was copied really closely, okay, then you're 5e adjacent, I'll give your thing a shot. If you're 5e, I'm all in, right? Like, if you're if you use the same rules as D&D 5e, no problem, let's do it, right? And you could get some real numbers, and you could actually, support a company barely, and give people a barely living wage, right? So that's why the indies fall off and the OSR is left, right? So then you go a little further, okay? Now you arrive at the OSR, and all of this is being looked at with hyper close attention, right? Because Kumbaya Garden is gone, Contested ground has arrived, right? And so what is the OSR? It's a pancake stack of already done and dusted losers, right? OSC, DCC, Pathfinder, right? Dungeons & Dragons already handed in their butt, right? Out of the smoke emerges Arcane Libraries, Kelsey, Dionne, with a brand new, finished tabletop role-playing game. And you're like, oh, Scott, it's not finished. You can go kick rocks. It's already been distributed as a physical book, right? I say it's finished. I think what's happening right now at the Kickstarter is it hasn't been monetized, right? Like, and so there's some gestures which are saying, we're finishing the book. It's finished, okay? It's already been distributed. It's already been printed. It's already been published. The only thing is, like, 2 people in the world have the physical book, okay? So all this Kickstarter is just monetization, which I'm not opposed to. I'm not opposed to monetization at all, okay? Not one iota. I'm an American capitalist, right? So I'm not opposed to monetization. But let's be clear, I don't think what's happening with the Kickstarter has anything to do with finishing the game. It's literally, just monetizing it, in my humble opinion. All right. So Kelsey Dionne emerges. And in the link below, okay, and actually in the description, you'll see 12 YouTube channels that have coalesced to absolutely champion Shadowdark RPG, right? And this coalescing is like nothing I have ever seen in the OSR, right? And so I appreciate you guys continuing to hear me. So here's the thing. Not only do I think Shadowdark RPG, I think Shadowdark in 2023, this is my prediction, okay? There's D&D. Everybody realizes the indies suck. They're done. Their numbers are so ridiculous, nobody wants to talk about them, right? And so they don't function as an actual competitor to D&D, and they're never going to overtake D&D. Why is Arcane Libraries, Kelsey Dionne, a possibility for a real new competitor? Sweep Paizo off the board. Arcane Library becomes the core company of OSR, and Shadowdark RPG becomes the core premier tabletop role-playing game of the OSR, and Arcane Library replaces Paizo as an actual competitor to D&D. And the reason why is, I think, we actually know the numbers. Paizo made about $25 million in 2019, and we don't actually know D&D's numbers, but you can guess that it was around $250 million. So Dungeons & Dragons generally does 5 to 10 times the business of their number one competitor, okay? And that doesn't even count the fact that MTG, you could count that as a D&D product because they're literally... MTG settings are literally canon in Magic. Dominaria, Kaladesh, Innistrad, list goes, Theros, Ravnica, the list goes on and on and on and on and on, okay? So basically, depending how you count, D&D is outperforming Paizo by 5 to 10 to 32 times if you use the full $875 million that was for Hasbro in 2019, which would include Magic's numbers. It's far outperforming Paizo. So Paizo is already a done and dusted loser, right? But here you see Absolute Tabletop. You see Arcane Library, Kelsey Dionne merging out of the smoke, right? And she is everything that the OSR isn't. She's young, she's female, she's innovative, right? And here's the biggest one. She has courage. Now let's talk about representation. So last night, Michelle Yeoh was the first Asian. You don't even have to go to female, right? She is the first Asian female to ever win Best Actress or Best Actor, or like the best. They still split it into gender, but Best Actor, she won Best Actress for Everything Everywhere All at Once, right? Which I saw. It was a good film, and saw it on the big screen. Proud of that because I saw what was the best film of the year in theaters. Did you? All right, like, okay. So what's really exciting is she identifies openly as Asian. Okay. Now, what's really fascinating, right, is people came along and go, this isn't the first Asian actress to be nominated, right? But it doesn't matter. The other Asians didn't have the courage to openly identify as Asian, so they don't get to take the crown, right? And that's the thing that's special about, as every day we go forward in 2023, I think the year of 2023 is D&D getting a new real competitor, which is Arcane Library and is Kelsey Dionne, right? Because the reality is right now the OSR is incredibly confused. They can't even decide what their acronym means. And their image is crusty old grognard white dude, right? And here's a young, free-thinking, brilliant female creator who's coming forward and saying, I already did the work. I got the game, right? And this is at a time where the OSR is in their shut up and put up era, right? Because they talked so much trash during 2023 OGL crisis that now there has to be a there. It can't just be talk, right? And that's what the OSR was for decades, just talk, just watching from the corner and like, oh, what's happening over there? We got good stuff too. Do you? What do you got? Where's your numbers, right? And so Kelsey Dionne has this real possibility of converting the OSR into a real competitor for Dungeons & Dragons. And Dungeons & Dragons really hasn't had a real competitor for a long time, right? And so this is very exciting, and I really think this is the TTRPG story of the year. Now, what's special about Kelsey Dionne? Why do I keep talking about her? I already knew she was capable. I already knew she was willing. Okay, she's capable of being a true of taking her company Arcane Library and making it a true competitor to D&D. She's willing, and here's the other one: she has courage, right? Courage that King Waspinator doesn't, right? Here's a young female creator who has, in her little finger has more courage than King Waspinator over on Total Party Skills, right? Because look at what happened, right? I had a dust up about a month ago with King Waspinator, and I said, I think you're an OSR voice. He came and was like, I'm not an OSR voice. And I'm like, you wrote an OSR game, by your words, you wrote an OSR game, published an OSR game, and continue to publish an OSR game to this day. And he's like, well, I don't want to get put in a box, right? So I'm not an OSR voice. Doesn't have any courage. He lacks the courage to openly identify as OSR. Not Kelsey Dionne. You got a person who's capable, willing, and has courage. And King Waspinator, great guy. I think he's got a great channel, but he's a perfect stand-in for everything that's wrong with the OSR. Just a bunch of old white guys who lack courage, right? And here you see a young female creator coming in with more courage than all the other men in the OSR combined. And what is that courage? When she said Shadowdark RPG is OSR, that connects her to the sins of Venger Satanis. That connects her to the sins of that guy that makes Lamentation of the Flame Princess. That connects her to the sins of new TSR, right? And so she has to answer for that, right? And so what's her answer? Her answer is Shadowdark RPGs. She's like, I'm not going to answer a bunch of questions. I'm going to give you something to talk about, which is a done, amazing, not defeated tabletop role-playing game. And I'm excited about that, and the OSR is excited about that because here's a real competitor showing up at the time where OSR moves into the shut up or put up era, right? And they have to shut up and they have to put up. And it's happening through Kelsey Dionne. She's putting something up. And I think Shadowdark RPG is already being well received. It could be a banger hit in the industry, right? And all that fear and frustration that happened in the OGL 2023 could coalesce into sales for Kelsey Dionne's Shadowdark RPG, and it become the banner flag, right? And this is important because Cobble Press, they're like, oh, Project Black Flag, and people are like, you're just pouring D&D into a cup. Nobody's going to get excited about this. And so they're like, what can we be excited about? What can the OSR do to actually, put up and shut up, right? Like, shut the mouth and put some things on the board, right? And I think that's what Shadowdark RPG, and I really think the order of importance this year is every D&D canon hardback and Shadowdark RPG, and there's nothing else on the board this year. This is the year where we see if D&D can get an actual real competitor. And I think the courage of Kelsey Dionne to openly identify as OSR, she gets to put the crown on exactly the way Michelle Yeoh put the crown on. I can't tell you the name of the lady who was Asian but got nominated. I don't know her name because she didn't claim it, right? Like she didn't have the courage to say, I'm Asian, right? And so Michelle Yeoh did. She took the slings and arrows of it, and which shouldn't be there but are. And it's like, I'm gonna put this crown on my head, and that's what you got in Kelsey Dionne. You got a capable, willing courageous creator, unlike King Waspinair, right? Like, you know, and I'm using him as a proxy. There's 100 guys like him, right, who are just like, and I think there are OSR males who are courageous enough to claim it, and they're willing to do the work, but they're not capable the way, you know, and they haven't done anything that excited anybody, right? And this is the point. Shadowdark RPG is exciting people, and she's willing and she's courageous. She is the premier company, the premier product, the premier creator of OSR, and I think something really different is happening right now. And the contested ground that we see, D&D has stood, you know, with no real competitors, right? And Kelsey Dionne emerges out of the shadows, out of the smoke, right? And D&D could have a real competitor. That's interesting. That's fascinating. And congratulations to Michelle Yeoh for having the courage to claim who she is, to openly identify as Asian, and get that crown, right? And Kelsey Dionne is that's exactly where she's going right now. She's like, give me the crown. I'm OSR, I'm female, I'm innovative, I'm a creator. My company can go to the top, my product can go to the top, I can go to the top. I have the courage to seize it. Unlike King Waspinair, doesn't even have the courage to own his title as an OSR voice. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing and have a wonderful millennium.